Greetings, everybody, and welcome to the Obelisk. Apologies for starting late tonight. We were goofing off. Getting buzzed. Getting ready. Preparation, yes.
One toke over the line.
One toke over the line, sweet Jesus. We never did that karaoke night, did we?
No, but we need to.
I know. Anyway, tonight's guest is Mr. Nathan Day, someone I've known for about 3 years now. Frequent Cruising with Steak cast member. That's a good term for it. And co-creator, co-founder, co-contributor, I'm not sure which one of those is correct, to stolenhistory.net. And just all around swell guy. So we're going to talk hidden history tonight and all kinds of cool shit like that. So Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jer Bear.
Anytime, buddy. Been looking forward to this.
Jer Bear. We've already been talking about booty cream, deep booty cream. Y'all missed out on that.
And sounding.
I don't even know what that is.
It's urethral dilation. How's that?
Yeah, you put them down your penis.
Oh, the tuning fork thing.
No, it's not a tuning fork.
Oh,
but it is kind of, well, tune you right up.
Hit that high F.
That's right.
Nish, I just saw your message about got the link, and I'm sorry I didn't see that.
No, I realized you probably sent it to where I found it.
Okay, good.
Which means you've sent it everywhere. I just didn't see it.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Same as always. Hi, everyone. Nathan, again, it's nice to finally meet you. You're like OG over there, and I feel like that's my family as well, even though I'm the long-lost girl that only shows up once in a while when she needs a $5 bill.
But you're like a beer pong celebrity shot. When you and Suzanne pop into the chats, everybody's all ears. It's a warm welcome.
You know, well, I'm just a potty mouth on that show. It's my favorite place to just be absolutely ridiculous and let it go. I let it flow as well.
And we have all that.
Sometimes you got to let your hair down.
And we have all that filthiness on tape.
I know it's there, people. It is there.
Spotify has no censor.
I love that. I have never censored myself on that show, and I have made quite a fool of myself. You know, people, this is the thing. A lot of people don't realize that I'm a comic, and you can see it on Cruising with Steak for real, but it's nasty. You know, I'm from the old school where I'm inappropriate, irreverent, and I make fun of myself mostly.
You're like Bob Saget.
Yeah, well, minus the pedo stuff.
He's not a pedo.
He's dead. He's nothing now.
Well, yeah, but he was not a pedo. He was
nothing from nothing.
Now that Dave Coulier guy, I don't know about him.
Oh my God.
No, I don't. I honestly have no idea what kinks they're into. But it's not pedo anymore.
There's so many these days.
It's minor attracted person.
I know. I can't believe that actually is a thing. It's so crazy to me. This is how crazy our world is right now.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a really good example.
Yeah. Oh,
George Carlin had a specific bit on that where you take one thing and you just extend the name of it to make it more polite. You guys remember that bit? He was talking about shell shock and turning it into PTSD.
Yes. He was very anti-politically correct, as I am. I love that. I saw him in concert once. I don't remember what year it was, but he did that bit on stage. It was great.
Well, I love me some of these old school characters anyway, like Don Rickles. Come on, people. And Red Fox. Oh my God. Joan Rivers. These people just couldn't get any work in this climate at all. Even Joan Rivers.
Jackie Mason.
Yeah. Oh my God. Exactly. There's so many goodies out there that it's
Dangerfield. He'd have problems.
I know. These were great comics. They were really just irreverent. And that's what, in part, that's really what we're missing is a lot of this. Let's look at ourselves and laugh about all this, anything ridiculous. That's the point. We like lost the humor. Well, we haven't, but society at large. They need some of that deep booty love cream.
They do, and to be called dirty words and humiliated. No, I don't want to get into this whole discussion. I would love to get into this whole discussion. Yeah, no, that.
The problem is
we need a soundbite.
Don't make me laugh, eh?
Okay, so we do have a guest of honor tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get into that if you want to talk about that some night, and just because I have, my observations of where that all came from and why it's proliferated, and it's an interesting topic to me. So, but not tonight.
Wait a second. Where what all came from?
I'm thinking deep booty love. What are you talking about, Jerry?
I'm talking about comic self-censoring and the whole political correctness thing. And
okay. I gotta bring
that's swinging back the other way. So
yeah.
We're just going to have to sit tight until it comes back.
I completely agree. And it's going to come back hard.
It's on the way back.
Yeah,
the,
I know.
The anti-woke stuff is already being... they're already warning you about how dangerous the anti-woke trend is right now. It's so exciting.
It's extremist. We're extremists because we don't believe what they believe, so we are extreme.
I mean, they're really trying hard to shut us up, though, at the same time as this backlash is happening. The current administration in a lot of these countries is creating these agencies to make us capitulate. Yeah, I mean, look at some of it. You can't criticize, like, legally. You can't criticize stuff.
Well, you can in the United States. You can't elsewhere
right now. But look at all these other countries, including what's gone on in England this week.
They don't have a First Amendment.
I will tell you
or a Second Amendment.
The UN passed a specific resolution about a specific schmollishmost idea, and multiple U.S. states have now passed legislation on it just a few months ago. Went completely under the radar. So they're really trying hard to make us be like Germany is today.
Yes, they are. And it's going to be interesting how it all plays out. But let's talk ancient history and all that.
It's going to be a bloodbath, I hope. No, I'm kidding.
I would like to see, just as a note, I would like to be able to visit Sweden and experience Swedish people and Swedish culture. Is that too much to ask? Or, England and experience English culture and the English instead of third world Africa? Or what even happened to Paris? Is Paris now what, Rwanda? I mean,
I don't know.
This is what's so
Kanye
sad
wrote a song about it.
Ye is rocking it.
That song is years and years old, and it gets truer every day.
I don't know any of this guy's music.
Ye's a genius.
All right. Anyway,
I don't care what anyone says, but anyway, let's get to it.
Yeah, tell us about stolenhistory.net. I know there is a story behind that, although I don't recall it. Like, it was someone else's site, and then someone worked there and left. I don't remember Please do tell.
I am, compared to my better, Mr. Trismegistus, or Alex Hagag. Alex, am I saying that last name right? I don't know.
He's gonna
also
be pissed
known
you
as
doxed him.
Flavortown.
Yeah, Flavortown. Yeah. Flavortown.
AKA the Orphan Train Conductor, the real OG. Now, Stolen History was one of the old forum style sites that you see. You still see these pop up today. They take nothing to maintain if you leave them in the bare bones state. But a lot of people began to gather and correlate long form research and long form studies and put things together. And you had a small crowd initially, but there was one entity, and this was Corbin Dallas. And Corbin Dallas maintained the site and also posted an inhuman amount of content. So events changed over time, and stolenhistory.org dropped off the map. But all of the contributors there stuck around, and after all the confusion, because they had no access to the administration of this original site, they created their own, called it stolenhistory.net, and this is where we're at today. Now, stolenhistory.org, the original site, is still up. It's still available for perusal, and a lot of the content from that site has been archived and reposted on stolenhistory.net. But the difference in administration and site flow is night and day. It's completely different. Now, I am not a core member of this. I am simply a contributor. I've been on a couple shows to talk about it. Grimerica, we did 2 spots on there about Tartarian hidden history. And as far as my contributions to the site go, I've done a bit of narration, some voice work for them, a bit of a weekly podcast that we tried to get off the ground, but everyone was dying of COVID. So that was put on hold for a bit. As well as a video on electric cars in the 1800s and general support. Now, we've been doing this for quite a while, but I'm not going to say I'm even a core member. I'm just a contributor. And this is it's kind of the point of me. I see no need to be a figurehead. I see no need to be
the same way.
I don't know if anybody else ever got this fear, but I was 15 when MySpace was big. I was at least 18 when Facebook and Farmville got big. But I remember the early days of what is now the internet, and I was so terrified of going viral. I think that stuck with me. I don't want to be famous and then picked apart for every word I mispronounce or for every idea that woke culture can't get down with. No way. I'm way too spicy for that.
I've always loved doing shows with people, and that's why my show is not a monologue show either. It's a guest show, and that I feel you on that. I just feel you. And also, you can only take those figurehead shows or the monologue shows so far, in my opinion, because people tend to loop on their stories and they loop on their opinions. You already kind of know what's going on, unless they're really, really good. And maybe not all that prolific, because the same stuff, if you're an honest human, there's, you can, unless I guess you're one of these UFO famous people out there that's constantly got new content coming out your arse that you're saying is true. I'm not going to say CG out loud.
No, and that's not Secure Team 10. No.
Yeah. Oh, this show's turning.
Now, the trap that most people fall into is that they make something regular, but they don't have that dearth of content. There's a finite amount of things that they initially set out to talk about. And so they find themselves pushing for more, stretching things out, regurgitating so much information and relying on, we could say, shaky sources to produce more information to share. And then on top of that, trying to monetize and merchandise everything.
Oh God, I know. Yeah.
And you find yourself at an impasse. Do I stop until there's more information? Or do I keep going and try to keep all these fish on the hook? And I saw that trap pretty early on and decided that's not for me. Not at all. I'm going to walk around and I'm going to find something I've never heard of. And I'm going to have somebody teach me. And that's kind of how I fell into every single thing I've ever looked at here. And Stolen History is still, even a couple years after finding them, stolen history is at the forefront of collaborative international research as far as any of this is concerned.
And that's awesome. This is the whole thing with anything. I think the more people focusing to try and figure out something, the stronger, the better, the higher quality you have. And it's people that can't share or won't be open to other people's research or stories. And there are plenty of those people out there right now with cults. I'm not going to name names because I want to, but I'm not going to. So this is really cool, Nathan. I love this. And this is kind of, well, isn't this is almost basically open source with your research and studies and collaborations.
This is actually, it's all completely open source. You have mostly a crowd initially of people over 40. And almost all of that crowd is actually over 50. And these people, they began with their localities. Galveston, Texas features heavily in a few threads, and you would not believe the almost 2 centuries of strange history to come out of this unique location. You can go to Galveston today, and if you have the eyes to see, it's a frightening place.
Well, tell us a little about what we could see over there on the island.
Island?
Isn't Galveston an island?
No. It has an island off the coast, like a breaker.
Ah, yes.
But it's not an island.
So Galveston is this weird spot. It's kind of like New Orleans. It's the location of 2 Cat 5 hurricanes 100 years apart. The town has been just rent in twain on multiple occasions, but nothing near it gets touched. And after that, the esoteric information in the building and the battles fought near Galveston and the rebuilding and subsequent rebuilding of Galveston, it's just so strange. Especially right, I don't know how to explain it. The place is unique, but I would know nothing of Galveston if it weren't for stolen history and somebody who lives near there. You also have people who live near the mountains of Andalusia in Spain.
Yes.
And you can actually find an old star fort up there, and it's selling for $3.2 million. If you'd like to go live in the mountains where nobody will ever bother you, that's where you go.
I need to borrow some money.
Man,
and get a passport.
We need to win the lotto. That's what's going on.
We have all talked about, all different groups have all talked about going in on buying a star fort somewhere. And I mean, it's cheaper than a house in Seattle right now. So if we all went down on it, we could have a couple of these locations. The homes are already built. And there's aquifers under most of them.
You know I love this idea.
And you know I love aquifers.
Yes. Well, water is how we humans need water to live, especially clean water, as opposed to whatever's going on now with all the poisoned waters.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So you still didn't tell the story that I was thinking of, so I might be wrong, that there was some kind of fight between the original stolen history people and then you guys, and you ended up setting up a new site, or they, not you personally, but the group involved there. Am I misremembering that?
So Corbin Dallas was a little weird in that after a while, people began to think that he wasn't one person. He actually lived out in my area. I'm in Washington State. And
oh, so am I.
Heck yeah, good place to be, almost.
How now, brown cow?
So KD for short. KD was putting in an inhuman amount of work. And the quality of it just seemed like a team more than a person. So when the site went down and KD went black, there were a million different fan theories about it. And sorry. And you guys are well aware of how people get paranoid about creators and about people being agents or
Shills,
Yes.
grifters. Yeah, absolutely. Glowing ones.
So I feel like every great origin story has a betrayal, and this was it. This was it. And so when we started up the new Stolen History, I say we, not me. When the new Stolen History came up, it was Corbin Dallas Free. And since then, he's come back, but still to this day, nobody knows who he is, or if it's a they, or if it's a she. And we don't even know if it's the original KD that's back in the new Stolen History site. That's the power of anonymity, I suppose.
Which is not easy in this day and age.
Well, as an admin of that site, you could find the IP address that they post under.
It doesn't even matter. It bounced around so much. It was
who cares?
So a few of our admins have been in the tech world since before the internet, and they can't find this guy at all. They can't find any discerning information. I mean, the mystery remains unsolved. It's pretty
I'm intrigued.
crazy.
Yeah, I'm very much intrigued.
His posts are still, even years on there, still staples of Stolen History lore. It's not like they're posts that we know are misleading. It's they're sound research. So it's really strange.
Sock it to us. Give us some idea of some of the juicier content that is very high woo or high strange.
Oh, do you want the weird stuff to start? Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry,
of course.
guys.
Let's get into some deeper ground.
I'm used to doing this stuff as a duo, and so I might require some prompting.
Oh, you got that cream, Jer?
Wait, for whose booty?
It's called anal ease. It numbs the pain. That with a little isobutyl nitrate, and we're set.
If you need to ease in it, we'll start with the sounds.
Yes.
I thought it was a post cream, not a preparation cream.
Oh, jeez.
Dang.
We need the drum roll.
So, let's say we know nothing about alternative theories. Were you aware that California was once an island?
Well, I thought Galveston was, so.
No, do tell. We do not know that.
Okay, so California used to regularly flood until the giant water project that we did up north. We diverted the Columbia, all of this. But even before it used to flood, California can be seen in maps all the way up into the early 1800s as being completely isolated. And what's strange about this isolation is, not only are there many names that they refer to the island proper as, the two most prominent names that you can find for the north and south portions of the island of California is the Carolinas.
Oh, and that's interesting.
And the Carolinas were home to the Black Amazons, to Khalifa, the goddess that in the 70s, Whoopi Goldberg was her, and now Beyonce is her. This was California.
All right, I'm tracking with you.
And let's just skip around. Let's talk about what that could mean if California was an island. Well, if California was an island, then that would mean that there's a stretch of water that goes through Death Valley, and that would mean that the west coast of America proper is Utah, which is really strange because if Utah is the westernmost landmass of the continent, then the Mormons going out to Salt Lake City and building their temple has a strange correlation to the direct geographical description of a famous temple. And do you guys know what the Mormon temple is fashioned to look like?
Temple of Solomon?
Exactly.
That was
which is really
guess,
strange,
by the way.
Oh no, it's spot
this,
on. There's a bath that is held aloft by 12 metal bulls. Or is
yeah,
it
that's
6 metal
underground.
bulls?
That's where they do the baptism to the dead down there. But so if that's the western coast and California is an island, is Washington and Oregon included as California? Or are they include? What happened to Washington and Oregon, and say British Columbia?
This depends on the maps, because the maps they feature a little differently. Almost always, at least the southern half of Oregon is separate from the earth or from the continent proper, and sometimes it is Oregon and Washington all the way up into BC, about halfway. Imagine Florida, but upside down, and that's the top of California in some of these maps. But it's really strange. While almost all of the maps of the rest of the world maintain a specific accuracy, and quite a high level of accuracy, the maps of California differ so greatly. And I think this has to do with the Great Upwelling. And if you're unfamiliar with the term the Younger Dryas event, this is just a change in glaciation and an upwelling of water from aquifers underneath directly after the glaciation fell off.
Okay.
And so we think that actually the shape of California was malleable, that it changed so often, and this is why the maps show no consistency in the exact shape of the island.
And kind of like we see it today, is Baja included in all that?
Sometimes Baja is, which is really strange, because you don't really see any mountainous areas in Baja. So I don't see geographically how it could have been a part of the island at one time and then not, unless something actually happened. But it's really strange.
Interesting. This is intriguing.
And California and Shasta, of course, are replete with all the stories of Mu and the Hollow Earth or the Honeycomb Earth. And we
Makes
actually
me think of Tammy Wynette singing Moo Moo. I love that song so much.
Yeah.
The KLF, that was the band.
But just one little fact and facet makes so many other things so much more interesting. California was once separated from the continent by water. We actually have a lot of photos and lithographs of at least minor flooding. Sacramento proper, what we call Old Town Sac now, it used to flood anywhere from 8 to 28 to 32 feet every couple years. And this happened all the way up into the 1860s, where the last photos of that are known.
So when we start getting into like the 1860s, aren't we starting to talk about the last reset? Or am I way
weird.
off here?
No, actually, these questions are hard to answer without ascribing to a specific theory. So, like, if you're talking to Graham Hancock, you're going to get a straight answer first thing. Or like asking a flat earth or a round earth question, they have these, quick fire responses ready. But if you consider all of it,
talking points,
it's harder. Yes, it's harder to do it without parroting it. The 1800s were such a crazy time that before Andrew Jackson's reign of terror, before his presidency, there was a different type of stability in the text and in the behaviors of the populace of this continent. And then after that end times scare that they had, which coincides with the last at least minor reset that we had in the 1800s. Then we pick back up in the 1830s like nothing ever happened.
You mean the 1930s?
No, the 1830s.
So we went from the 1860s backwards.
Oh, I'm sorry, Andrew Jackson.
As far as
wait,
when
I did
you
go
were
backwards.
talking,
My bad. I'm sorry. There's
yeah.
So Andrew Jackson's presidency was what years? Do you
Jerry,
guys remember 1895, 1902?
Jerry's on that case
No.
for the exact details so we don't speculate.
1829 to 1837.
Okay, so these
the
are
seventh president, lawyer, planter, general, and statesman who served as the seventh president. There you go.
So this gentleman oversaw what I think personally was the last great reset. But all of the events with California being an island seem to have stopped almost 100 years before. That's all. I got confused about the reset part. No, I think the end of California being an island, in any measure of the word, was when we diverted the Columbia and did that massive water project down into California.
But okay, so why I asked this question, and most people will know the 1860s, this is, the Civil War and all that with Lincoln and all that. But why I asked that question is later on, up more towards the end of that century, we started to have all these orphanages and people, and there's lots of really credible evidence about them. I mean, they're talked about in publications, and there's so much there. And I've been curious about that, and the Cabbage Patch Kids and all this stuff from the turn of that century that is mysterious to me. And then as we move into that whole last like Spanish flu, and that period looks kind of resetting, like why did we have so many kids? What's going on with this Cabbage Patch thing? And then, people ascribe that to some sort of a reset there.
Historically, even to the most normie norms in the entire world, there's a simple explanation for the orphanages. As for the amount of them, it's insane. So we were mid-genocide with the people who were here before the Anglos came over en masse. Sure. And we sell children because child labor and slave labor is still a thing. Even after the abolition of slavery, or so-called, that was still a thing. And so we have all of these displaced children taken from their families. And the famous talking point is that in France, they boasted having sold 40,000 in 1 year. Sold 40,000 children. Like giving a dowry so that you can have a child. Okay.
How different is that from modern day adoption, though?
It's not. It's just
more open.
It's really crazy because the famous Jim Jeffries joke is, I think it was Jim Jeffries. The black ones are cheaper.
Oh, Lord have mercy. So, all right.
So, but it's the great population shuffle. When you want to take
when you
out
say the
your
black
neighbor,
ones, are we talking about the Irish? Because remember, the Irish had to come and they had to turn into whites. I mean, there's that whole book with how the Irish became white. It's a historical thing.
It's a metaphor, though.
There's actually,
I know, I understand that, Jer, but it's still, they were really low on the totem pole. Conceivably low.
Oh, yeah, Irish were, yeah, they got fucked around.
It wasn't until the Baconian Rebellion back in the day that the Irish were even elevated above the status of blacks, because
that's what I'm saying.
They kept pairing together, and running through the countryside, killing slave owners and killing landowners, and they had to find a way to separate them. So they said, at least you guys believe in God, so will you help us put down the other ones? And the Irish took to it. I mean, despite near 300 years of subjugation at that time. You can find more information about that in the book called White Cargo.
I'm sure they offered them whiskey or something. So.
Well, no, they offered them a little bit better sleeping quarters.
Yeah, right.
They just, but historically, the idea of the Great Population Shuffle is really easy to understand. You defeat your neighbor, you take their children, you sell those children into bondage, and so now you don't have sons and daughters coming after you 20 years later. Then you allow the slaves you capture to fight on the front lines while you go for their neighbor and repeat the process. And so over the course of a couple centuries, you can completely shuffle the population. And people forget where they came from. They really do.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the bigger reasons why I don't trust these ancestry.com and all those things. I know I can only trace my ancestry back to like the late 1800s when my great-grandparents came over from Syria, and that's it. There's nothing before that I can find. So
see, they were probably in the orphanages.
I don't think so,
because there's a lot of woo around this, Jerry.
And I think orphanages, people today think of orphanages back then as being the same way they are now. It's kind of like the logical fallacy where you attempt to judge the actions of 1,000 years ago by the morals of today's culture. Like, they do not equate. Orphanages are just where they held them until they could sell them. That was it.
Well, and that's what
houses if they needed labor.
And that's what is so juicy about the whole Cabbage Patch thing and the rose, you know, the cabbage rose and the roses as well. And all the postcards and all, you know, in the books and on the ledgers and stuff like that. And even that video, the first movie reels that we were seeing with this stuff around that time, the turn of the century. This stuff's very intriguing when you start actually looking at the hard data and trying to extrapolate what is the narrative here.
And that's one of the things that's impossible to put together, because so much obfuscation came in the form of updating our mode of thought. And it went to the point where we forgot the old mode of thought completely. Like, the amount of updating that we've done in public libraries and in school libraries, where we've just taken the old books and burned them. Nowadays, it's a treat if you can find a book before 1947, because the explanation of the times, if you can read between the lines, lends so much more credence to the world back then.
I'm an antiques person, and I've had several stints in my life of dealing antiques, and I grew up with grandparents that were antique dealers. So I have spent my life around very old things, and I have a very good library of old things as well. And that stuff is amazing, and the stuff you read in those are amazing. And the thing that's really nerve-wracking now is everything that is in digital form, just like we saw with Netflix. They automatic update stuff by editing it for the moment, for the times, and it's the new form of book burning. Really,
it's ruined Disney. You actually have to buy the old VHSs to hear the original songs. Go on Netflix, you'll find a lot of the songs are edited. The opening song from Aladdin, the best lines are just gone.
Yeah, they are. And that was a great soundtrack too.
Yeah, it was. But we're constantly doing that. Iconoclasm is the one thing you can count on as an empire changes. China is the best at it, but we're doing it too. There's even new forms of it. The Hati Trust. Have you heard of this?
What was that, Nathan? Hot tea
Yeah,
trust?
I have Hotsi, H-O-T-S-E.
Oh,
The
Hotsi.
Hati Trust. It's Hathi, H-A-T-H-I.
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I'm
The
thinking
Hati Trust. They're digitizing collections in universities and internationally, and you have to be a member of the university to gain access to these books. And you can no longer get hard copies once it's been digitized, but the checkout limit is 1. So if I have a digital book, you want that digital book for the time that you have that digital copy in your possession. No one else can possess a copy. Although digitally, you have the power to let 1 million people see it. And it's really strange.
But at the same time,
sequestration of information.
Conceivably, though, once it is digitized, there, this is an honor system, because those in control will have the power to change what's written. And it's done all the time. It can be so subtly, and the boards of director and all that do switch and do, move around. So this is kind of like an honor system, in my opinion.
It's like that line Napoleon said once, was history is a lie agreed upon by men.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's right.
And it's actually a strange thing to see history go the way it's going right now, because we have people who are so hell-bent in the world today on calling their recent ancestors evil and demonizing entire groups of people for the recent history we have, and yet will cite that history and believe it to be true.
Don't get me started on all this. I rant left and right about all this.
Let me quote my villain. So even with current events, you can look at them in a historical mindset. When has this happened? How's this happened? But the weird stuff, we have no explanation for. You were talking about the babies in the orphan trains, but surely you've seen the incubators in the fairs.
Well, that's part of that whole situation, the incubators. And see, that whole Cabbage Patch thing is tied into all this.
The best I can think personally is that children of a different race or with no backing, much like in Great Expectations, were sponsored. Basically, you're my pet.
And it's not by Miss Havisham.
No, and not even by a rich criminal. No. We're still doing that completely. Of course, with the whole Haiti DR thing with Laura Silsby, you can see that happening, but that happens in Guinea, in Venezuela, all through South America. Like I have a daughter. I'm never, ever bringing her to Brazil. She's going to be 30 before we go to Brazil, ever. And there's places where that's still widespread, but there's no explanation for it in the 18th century.
Well, there's a lot of people don't realize this, and I know this because I grew up around antiquities and old things and all, knowing this. But in the Victorian period, so we're looking at the 1860s ish and up into really the high 1880s for sure, but it did carry on in some places later. They would dress boys and girls clothing, and there's a lot, and you see this, they're in the photos. It's absolutely was a common practice, and the folklore around that was that they would keep the boys protected because they would get snatched up to work in coal mines and all this stuff real easily. The boys they'd put to work. And so, this is one of those things that history, well, a lot of people don't know about, first of all. And looking in their old photo albums, they think that's whatever great grandmother Mildred when it's great grandfather Harry, right?
Which doesn't make sense. It still doesn't make sense. Because if you're going to steal a child, there's two main reasons: for work and for sex. And so if you dress them all up like the sexable type, they'll still be stolen. So it's so strange. And I think a part of me wants to think that they just dress these kids up in gowns because gowns are cheap. Richer parents had trousers, but then you see rich photos where the boys are still dressed like girls.
Yeah. Oh,
It's not
in
like
the
everyone could
fancy,
afford a photo.
stuff. Right.
Yeah,
And so, I mean, but these are the same families that are propping up their dead in photos as well. They're dressed and they're propped up like they're sitting or standing.
yeah,
These aren't just casket shots. These are post-mortem, and this is like you'll have the whole family around dead papa sitting in the chair, right? And a lot of times the telltale is you can see, well, the stiff legs, or you can see them being propped up on a stand. I mean, they're out there. I had a huge collection of this postmortem stuff. And so these were things that people in our modern world were like, well, those funny Victorians, right? That, you know, they had an obsession with death and they had this weirdness about their kids and these traditions. But I think there's actually more going on there.
Well, okay, so if you could give an exact year for when it started, what year would you give? Let's say you just had to wing it.
The reset started?
No, for when that trend became popular. Just throw out a year.
I'm going to say it was probably in the 1860s because we start seeing the great mourning traditions. But I am not solid in any of this, Nathan. I'm very fluid with all this.
Oh yeah, and
I just have a lot of photos from that period.
It's unwise to ascribe to an idea when you haven't been able to consider all of them. So consider this: when did the rediscovery of Egypt set a fire under the asses of Europeans? The same decade that this death culture started. And what did that all come from? We find all of these structures and we find people living in them in what we call Egypt today. And we ask the locals, what is all this? Where did it come from? And the locals tell the Englishmen, they literally said, I don't know. Me and my children have been living here. Our family's been living here for a couple hundred years. We don't know where this came from.
Yes.
So with the rise and resurgence of this Kemetic trend that is now Egyptology in Egypt, and I mean, even with Lincoln's embalming, it all stormed the world. It became another fad. But at the same time, what did they actually find?
And see, this is the thing why I am most comfortable just dating this into the tintype era and all the, you know, these early photos, because before that, we have to rely on like woodcuts and drawings and going back to hieroglyphs and petroglyphs and all that. But photos are just such a very tangible thing to look at. And we're still able to source those, so many of those. And so this is the only thing I feel like secure about, because I know I have these in my collection. I can look at them. Not only that, but I have them in my family's tradition. I've got dead, the dead relative photo thing is never stopped, but the way that the Victorians in particular prop them up and would put the family around them, or you know, put them in scenes and stuff where they're cadavers, is very particular and very unique. These are outside of the coffin. they're like so in scenes, in vignettes. Very strange. And then you might have Uncle Harry in a Victorian dress as well. So you start to see how Chaz Adams came around in the last mid-century and started producing some of in his book Black Maria, started producing some interesting stuff out of that era from just looking at those artifacts. And then, you know, that's the birth of the Addams family. And it's interesting how he presented that as opposed to what people think the Addams family is now. This was a whole different dialogue that he was bringing forward with the kind of macabre weirdness of the Victorians.
It's also strange that over the last 15 years, that's happened again in America. The exact same trends that you see. The beatific death poses, the mortuary fascination, but not out of some sick perversion. It seems normal, laudable, especially in the art world and the fashion world. But how far back could we trace that? Now, I could understand in the 1800s, a family that before we relearn the arts of embalming, a family being forced to just put their child in the ground, and then a rich family hears that their child died, and so they can have their child dressed up and they can take one last nice photo and remember them as they were. I mean, sure.
Yeah.
If morals were different, certainly. It's still strange and creepy today. I don't know that I could reconcile that with today's culture, but we still do it today. If you don't put me under a tree, do not open my casket.
Well, you know, and then we look at different ideas of burials all along any culture, but I've always really enjoyed the Roma burials where they bury them standing. There's even that book, Bury Me Standing. And out here in Washington, where we both are, there are some places where there are standing graves from allegedly Roma people. The graves are there, and the you know, there've been I guess, what is it, ultrasound or whatever. You know, it's proven that they're in there standing, and we know that's a tradition that goes for real to the Roma people, as people might want to call them gypsies, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, these different rites are interesting. One of the things that has always intrigued me with the Mormons and their baptism of the dead, right, where they prepare the young brides or they prepare the young ones to they prepare their vessels to take on the soul or spirit of whomever they're conjuring forth in that bath that you were talking about earlier with all of the, you know, I mean, this stuff is very intriguing to me, Nathan. And as far as I'm concerned, there are more questions than we have answers at this point.
Oh yeah. You can't look at anything without walking away with twice as many questions as you started with.
That is so true.
As a good seeker, I agree with you.
That's the best way to be, though. I mean, do you need to have an answer all the time? Because most time an answer leads to dogma.
Yes.
Well, and then we encounter those people out there that their truth is the only truth, and this is it. That, by God, this is it. I've done all the research. You don't need any more, and I've got all the answers. And you know, but those kinds of people that come off from that angle that build cults up around them, it intrigues me, because how is it that people want to give away this curiosity and this idea of wonderment in trying to piece together where we are, where we've been, what's going on, what are these traditions, how does this all play with the bigger picture here, and is there a connection between these things? And I'm always seeing that more things are connected. I believe everything's connected on some level, but things that are apparently not connected somehow are connected, and we just haven't asked the right questions or found the right evidence to bridge that. Because, as we were talking about earlier, look at how everyone's always trying to wipe out the path.
Well, there are things that you can know without having to know the exactitude. You know how to take a right-hand turn in a car without knowing the exact speed you need to go for the diameter of the curve that you're in. And so there's a way to approximate an understanding without having to have a finite answer to it. And one of the worst things that you can tell somebody in their entire lives is good job. How do we mollify a people that are mad at a certain thing that's been done to them? We create a scapegoat, we persecute that scapegoat, and we tell the crowd, good job. And then they stop because they think the problem's solved.
That's
and
collectivism.
Then, yes.
The heart of collectivism, yeah.
And that problem is the same the world over with information like history or astronomy, astrology, oceanography, volcanosophy. Philosophy is maybe a rare exception, but nobody ever searches for an answer that they think they already know. And so nobody ever learns. And so when you tell someone, we've already explored the old world, Truman, you see what that leads to. Yeah. And so I think that questions might be the best thing for anybody.
Yeah. Yep. I can't agree with you more. I mean, you're speaking my language here. So let's look at this. Let's go deeper into what we're talking about here, though. So we're talking about resets of where we think we've been and resets of where we think we're going, because right now, conceivably, Nathan, it looks like we could be, I mean, everyone knows about the Great Reset and Schwab's vision and all this, but at the same time, look what's going on. There's a lot of genociding going on. There's a lot of changeover with financial systems going on. There's what looks to be some sort of re-terrification of the realm going on. I mean, does this not look like we're in one?
I don't think we ever left the last one. I think it's unending. It's just a part of the cycle. The only argument that you could have to say there's more murder and genocide in the world today is that you think there's more people in the world today. And, well, I disagree. Recent LiDAR scans that were maybe a decade old in the Amazon and let's say Brazil. Looks like the architecture they found in Brazil with LiDAR scans about 10 years ago is enough architecture to have housed around 60 million people that they say just never existed there. Stories of the Portuguese going up to that coast and trying to keep it a secret, but then going there a year later and finding none of the population that they said that they found the first time, because they're all dead. Now, this cycle that we're in, I don't think any portion of it specifically ends. It's not like it's night 1 second and day the next, and you can see the terminus and the shade withdraws in a straight line. You just find yourself in the day or the pervasive gloom.
Welcome to America. The pervasive gloom.
But
not even welcome to the realm in general.
So,
well, it's a death realm.
I spent a little over a year self-apprenticed, you could say, just trying to help out a man who is now a good friend, because one day I decided to see how far back I could go to try to find the word of God. And I mean the Abrahamic God. We'll just clarify that right there.
The demon Yahweh?
Yaldabaoth?
Yes.
But I went back as far as I could, and in the end, I couldn't find anything that hadn't already been translated by the Masoretes. You guys know the Masoretes?
No, do tell.
The Jews of the Mazorah.
So bring us up into this.
The Amora and the Tanish, the wise men and sages of the Jewish people, it is said in text, they formed the Mazorah, and the Masorah, Masorah. This has been contested until just a couple decades ago, when they pretended that they unified the Masoretic translations of the original Hebrew texts. The only problem is there exists no copies of the Hebrew text sans Masorah. Now, the marks and dots and dashes that they put on this Hebrew text is called the Nikudot, or the Nikud. Now, this tells you whether that word means donkey or roller coaster. Now, how did they ever read that without the dots and dashes? People say, oh, they grew up with the language, so they know the dots and the dashes. They're putting them there for you. The only problem is, all the way back to Prester John, all the way back to 2 centuries after Christ, they could not agree. They have never agreed on the dot dash system until very, very recently, where they put up a brand new unified front. This is even pre-Khazar. I'm watching the chat too.
Are we looking at the Essenes?
The Khazars, I was saying that were the name stealers. At least that's what Cliff High claims.
Hey, Cliff High's got some interesting Antarctica stuff. I remember him from a road trip 4 years ago.
Yeah, he does. He does. But we digress.
So, in essence, I'm looking for the word of God that the Jews haven't touched. And you can't find it. Why can't you find it? Now, you have a wealth of people the world over who mistrust the people who they say killed their Christ. And in evidence of that mistrust, point to a book that is translated by the people who killed their Christ. That doesn't make sense. Remember, I was talking about the blind adherence to texts by people who claim to be their enemies. So I found one man who is translating the Proto-Hebrew. And the Proto-Hebrew is closest to the script of the Oberim, the tribe of Ober, or Ober. And the website is called the Obry Project, OBRY, and project with a K.org. His name is Jonathan Maktimis, or Maktims, however you like to say it. And the things that he found and the things that I was able to help him find, they kind of change everything about recent history. And I spent a good amount of time looking at languages to try to further decipher this. And so, yeah, that ate up a year of my life.
Well, give us more. I'm on the edge of my seat here, literally.
Okay. Imagine we have words today that are phonetic. Thanks, Phoenicia. Which means that this symbol makes this sound. We also have words that are pictographic, which you could call hieroglyphs. But then there's a third type of text, and this is called the ideogram. It's ideographic. It's where a picture conveys an idea. Like, only recently have we begun using ideographs again, because they are, simply put, the best way to convey language between two people who have a shared experience. And that's called the emoji. We have emojis now, and we speak in emojis all the time. Everybody knows when I say this guy and I do an eggplant emoji and then a water emoji. You know exactly what I mean.
Yeah.
The only problem with an ideogram is that somebody growing up 200 years in the past or in the future is going to look at that, and they will puzzle over that until the day they die, because they have not shared our experience, which is the best way to share language. And so what we've found through correlation and through a lot of Jonathan's hard work is that these glyphs from Proto-Hebrew, without the Masoretic Nikudot, seem to be ideographic. And just like just like the rabbis today say there's a vulgar meaning and there's a deep intrinsic meaning to the text as well. So while we may be lost to the deeper meaning, we at least have the vulgar meaning of the Oberi. For instance, the word for brick in the Hebrew version of, we could say, Exodus, anywhere where you see brick. Brick actually doesn't mean brick. It is a specificity drawn from a general term meaning to build. Now, the problem with it is, as soon as we get to the Oberi, it takes on a more specific meaning thanks to the glyphs used and how they've been cross-referenced. So imagine if the Hebrews in captivity weren't bricklayers and stucco and spackler guys, but brick actually meant lumber or wood. What would that make every Hebrew? That would make them lumberjacks. What the hell's a lumberjack doing in the desert?
Or carpenters.
Carpenters as well.
Because the translation
of structure.
Sure. I've heard this also about Joseph, Jesus's father, being a carpenter, which was mistranslated from the original meaning, which was mason.
Yes, and he actually may still have been a mason, but the direct glyph translation, although we call it brick or stone, originally in the language of Ober was wood. And it's really strange because even 2,000 years ago, the Lebanese pine, or not Lebanese pine, the Lebanese cedar would have been the biggest tree in the area, and there were not enough of them to go around.
And it's not good wood to build structures from either. It's too soft.
Not at all. You would have to flash it and pitch it and leave it to dry. And it does not equate. And so the long and short of it, Jonathan has a theory that the more I think about it, the more I ascribe to it, that the Bible did not happen where they said it did. And I'm sure you guys have heard this before.
No, actually.
I
have heard that it was like maybe somewhere in Eastern Europe, right?
Oh, that's a big one, especially from the proponents of the those who say the Vikings were the true Jews.
Yeah, nothing about the Middle East
and the Scots.
Sense. Yeah.
What about, that's going around a lot right now. What about how the Star of David is not really mentioned anywhere in the Hebraic version? This whole idea that the Star of David is the Jewish star is an intriguing thing to me right now, and people questioning that when there's no hard evidence in the Old Testament about it.
Well, there's a lot of things that aren't in the Old Testament that you would think they would put in there. And not
something like
what's
the Star
cut
of
his
David,
fabric, because that's normal. It should be significant.
This is a big deal because we're talking about this symbol that is totally 100% related to the Jewish people and obviously to David and Solomon and all this.
I mean, yes, from a magical perspective, but from the viewpoint of the Abrahamic God, no.
Exactly.
More for magic, more for demons, more for mysticism, for knowledge. Which is
more
gnosis
Kabbalah, isn't that more of that leg or vein?
Well, I mean, before New Age supplanted old religion, I'm fairly certain that the mixture of the Abrahamic God with the Kabbalah was the old New Age. Kind of a cherry pick.
So I have a question for you here, actually, Nathan. I was listening to some of these translations of some of these rabbis. I've talked about this a little bit here and there. And this kind of blew my mind. I did not know this. So I really am a neophyte when it comes to ancient Jewish stuff. I'm learning as I go here. And one of the things I've been shocked by, and I've had to ask, I have friends in Israel that were born there and that speak, you have to speak Hebrew there. And so I've asked for, are these translations accurate, etc., because none of it's in English. But these Jews are talking about this narrative where they come from another place, like parasites, basically, and invade this as a realm to take it over. What is all this? Can you?
This is their mission given to them by their father, and they come in and to be honest, I haven't dug into that so much because even to me that's woo, and I'm on some woo stuff, but I feel like that's a new bastardization.
But the thing is, a lot of rabbis are talking about this, and they are actually talking. I mean, this is a situation that's giving an origin story that is way different than I ever heard. And it plays into definitely a lot of woo I have that I was unfamiliar with until just a few months ago, actually.
Well, you're familiar with the Nag Hammadi and the old Coptic script, right?
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so this even unto the 142 angels and their direct names and the correlations for the parts of the body. This speaks of a more meta idea, a more ethereal idea, which is actually quite strange because when you look at old works like Plotinus, you wonder at the leap that people took when thinking of that versus thinking of, a world beyond our physical reality in the Nag Hammadi. But how well that translates to what they say today, you have to wonder, are they using this or is it something they truly believe? Because just like any other political body, all words out of the mouth could be a political tool.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah.
And as far as the principalities, I mean, that is still a relatively new idea. And you don't find these rabbis talking about this before the discovery of the Nag Hammadi. And then
the
a couple years later,
the principality. Yes, yeah.
You don't really find that. And in fact, since the collective genocide of the early esoteric Christians, you don't find anything outside of more typical thought, except those held by the inner circles of those who practice Jewish mysticism. So like a lot of people like to call them Gnostics, but I mean, it's okay. They didn't call themselves that. They were early esoteric Christians, and it wasn't one group. I mean, you could look at the Valentinians, sure, but we're talking about 200 or 300 disparate groups of what they would have then called pagans, because they didn't believe the official adopted faith. And with their death came the death of all of this thought for the populace for centuries. Also, where is it? You asked a question in the chat. What's with all the Ethiopians who think they're true Israelites?
That was me.
They never ever called it Africa. It was all Ethiopia. So when they rediscovered the Ethiopians and discovered that the Ethiopian Bible, or as we say, Africa, that their Bible had 88 books still, and 88 is the esoteric number of completion, 88 constellations in the sky, all that.
Yeah, the 88's a big deal.
It really makes you wonder who's putting these ideas in people's head, because I'll troll TikTok for conspiracy theories, and that's been popping up over the last 3 weeks, where Ethiopians and Africans claim Jewish descent, and they claim they are the diaspora, and rabbis have tested them and are finding that they are Jewish, in fact, which is really strange because it's hotly contested amongst the clergy in Israel because they don't want to let them into Israel, and they're trying to come there en masse You want to fill up Israel with Israelites, you have all the Ethiopians you could ask for, and they won't take them.
Every Israeli that I'm friends with, Israeli born, all I hear is a lot of real racism towards anyone black skin. Like they don't want that. And so I think this is a good place to maybe look at the separation in the different types of Jewishness. There's the Cathars, and then there's the Ashkenazi, which I guess are supposed to be the most nasty. Those are the ones that, from what I'm learning now, those are the invaders. Those are the interdimensional invaders that have come to take over this space. Those are the ones that are not Jews, but are hiding amongst the Jewish people. And I've been looking at this through scholarship and having to, I don't speak Hebrew, so I have to ask people for these translations. I'm like, is this correct? What are you seeing here? And this is kind of what I keep learning, that when they talk about the Zionists, they're talking about the Ashkenazi.
Well, I could believe it if I didn't know information about the Sephardim.
And right, that's another sect. So see, I don't know.
Tactic. And we're just going to draw a couple points of logic, and they're probably full of holes. But the first tactic, if you have something hidden in a place, you want to make sure that people don't think it is where it is. So there's my line of thought for the Holy Land. Now, also, if you want someone to persecute a villain, you make someone look like a villain while you get away with it.
Yes, absolutely. This is a big deal.
I'm coming into the idea, and I can't say I have all of the information. Of course, I'll be dead before I do. But I'm coming into the idea that the Sephardim have been for centuries now using the Ashkenazim as a scapegoat, a thug arm. And famous examples of Sephardic rabbis, look at them. They do not look Jewish. In fact, they look, if anything, a little bit German. Rothschild, Mr. Red Shield himself, is the most famous Sephardim in the world, and he doesn't look Jewish. When you look at Alicia Silverstone, you don't know that she is actually of Sephardic descent. She's full blood on this.
But some look like South Americans too. I mean,
yes. Actually, so the transplants to South America are a complete different group. Unless they've remixed with the Sephardim, it's a little different. Like the Mitzrayim are those who stayed in and around North Africa and in the lands that the Arabs took. And so there's actually a lot of different types. But the ones expelled from the Iberian Peninsula went on to found the Dutch East Indies Company. They were at the head of Portugal when Portuguese ships from the 12 to 1400s were, without fail, the first ships anywhere. You look at Brazil, you look at Japan. Who got there first? Portugal, always. And so I'm coming to the belief that while the world persecutes Ashkenazi Jews, and they may do some bad stuff, hell yeah, I think you're fighting the sub boss and you're not fighting the big boss. I think that's what it is. We're so busy with the minions we can't see the shade in the curtain.
Thank you. That's what I'm trying to get at, is where does this go?
And moreover, where does that hidden hand, if you will, reside? Is that within the realm or extra realm? You know, that's my big question.
Well, how far away from provable fact do you want to get?
Oh,
because
no facts are provable.
I know so it is actually easier to come up with an ethereal answer than
absolutely
who controls the world.
Yeah,
because you could shout Black Pope, or you could say Black Nobility forever, but really the archons and principalities. even before Jung took the word archon and made the word archetype, things that control from beyond, you're never going to know. You're never going to know.
Right. We're never going to know.
But as far, you just what? Sorry.
No. I was going to say, my gut feeling is that it's not, that there's a level of control outside of humanity that drives these people.
Well, recent studies have been showing things that we have always called hokey ever since current scientism and dogma has come into being. We used to hold seances. We used to believe in ghosts, the voices of the dead.
Spiritualism
we used to
huge.
believe, yes. And then we decided that we were too good for it. And I think that's the greatest trick the devil ever pulled so far.
It's deeper than that. It was you can go back further. This is my opinion. You go back further and look at where science and religion split. When organized religion came about and split off from quote unquote science, before then they were one and the same thing. You couldn't be a scientist without also being highly spiritual.
Yes.
That's what ancient alchemy was all about. In addition to other professions. But once organized religion came in and split science off, that's when we started to it took a while for that to get fully stamped out. And I think spiritualism was like one of the last gasps of that merged science spiritual paradigm.
Yeah, most certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, the death of the shaman.
Yes.
What did we killed one man and replaced him with two.
Exactly. And one's full of shit.
Yes. And in our own esoteric way, I mean, you look at anything Hollywood and it is the death and perversion of the divine feminine as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've killed the nurturer, the mother, the healer, the mystic, the guide, and instead replaced it with dull answers. And this is actually historically pretty normal, to take any form of knowledge away from the plebs.
Of course, then you can rewrite it yourself. It only takes 2 or 3 generations till it's gone, and you have a clean slate. Yeah, these days, one for sure.
It's actually scary how fast it can go.
I know.
But when I think about the things I know, when I say
we're witnessing
AOL,
that now.
Yeah, when I say AOL to a 20-year-old, they're like, "What's OWL?" What?
No, they'll go, "No, it's AOC." You mean AOC?
AOC.
Well, I'm seeing people needing to tell others who, just in pop culture, who Andy Warhol is. And, that's just that's mind blowing to me, because he was like the biggest pop culture. I mean, he actually termed that. And so it's just this level of forgetfulness or never knowing, because they're not learning this. It's taking a lot of effort for young people to be able to, well, first of all, we're not producing a lot of people that read now because they don't need to. So, but to want to look back, and now if we're scrubbing the records and we're changing the narrative yet again, we've got a ball of confusion here and a lot of vitriol that has been obviously set up for this event we're in right now.
Well, now we're just in another phase of it. It's the unending revolution. The only problem now is something that Alvin Toffler first talked about in the 50s. And we went through future shock, and future shock being an inundation of information, so much that rather than inspire action, it inspires inaction, to freeze the deer in the headlights with, even if it is true, so much disparate information that mankind either goes mad from the revelation or flees to the peace and safety of a new dark age.
Sorry, I'm attending to chat.
Oh, no worries.
Well, one of the things like with the Jewish people thing is, I've had Jewish friends all over and a lot of Russian Jews that are genetically Russian, right? Or whatever that is, and genetically Polish. In fact, there's a huge amount of Polish Jews in Israel, and those are the friends I have. I mean, they're born in Israel, but their genetic history is Polish. So they even look at it. And all the Russian
Going back
Jews,
how far?
well, we don't know, but according to DNA testing, they're genetically, even though they've come religiously through their mother's side, right, to be Jews and they're in Israel and all this, but their genetic heritage is actually, Polish. And so, and this is what's intriguing because in like, say, DNA testing, like Jerry tested and is Ashkenazi. So that's actually something that comes up in the genetic testing. And so this stuff's all confusing to me because of looking at where Jewish people are across the board of genetics is interesting. So the Ashkenazi come into the picture, but these other types of Jewishness seem to not be on that board. I don't know. I mean, I'm actually grasping for answers through all this because, again, as I said earlier, I'm a neophyte with all this.
So it's really weird. What you call Polish today wasn't Polish 400 years ago. What you call Hungarian today, nobody knows how those people got there. You look at their language, nobody knows where they came from. They're surrounded on all sides for a couple thousand miles by a completely different subset of languages and DNA phenotypes and genotypes.
But they're landing them in villages.
Where we came from,
like my namesake is out of
population shuffle is everywhere.
I get that. And like what I was named after is a village that's now, I believe, in Poland, I think, and it wasn't at some point, but it's been named that village for hundreds of years, but it's just, it's moved on. It's basically what I understand Slavic when I look at the DNA stuff there. But, these things are all part of what we need to, this is where we find context. How do we parse out what's going on here and now if we can't really understand some of this stuff that gets us to here and now through all this fuckery?
Piecing it together is the work of generations. And unfortunately for us, we are not what most people would call elite. We think in terms of our next paycheck or our next fiscal year, or maybe even our lifetimes. Whereas the successful families, the heads of empires, think in terms of centuries, think in terms of generations. And so the work that we try to do, we have to hope that it gets picked up because we don't have anything like an artisan class or trade system. If I was born to a blacksmith 500 years ago, I'd be a blacksmith, and the work is carried on. Now, we don't do that in trade. We don't do that even in thought form and idea, because iconoclasm is so rampant that without the ties of blood, there's nothing to keep successive generations so closely bound to this endeavor. So it's quite strange that we've been able to dig up so much as a unit in a single generation, and moreover, in a single decade on the internet together. It's only been in the past 18 months that we've sort of broken the Cyrillic barrier from a research standpoint, because we couldn't get into Russia. We couldn't get the lore. We couldn't get the conspiracy theories. We couldn't get the history documents, the military and government documents. And when we're gone, there may not be anybody to carry this on. It's a scary thought.
And that's the thing. I remember the moment, and I kind of knew this at one point, but just getting back into this stuff recently, that, Caucasoids allegedly, because all this becomes kind of alleged, they rise right up out of what is now Iran, right? And that's where the Caucasus are. This is where I guess the seed of white people, the whiteness seed, comes up out of. And today, conceptually, a lot of people don't realize that. And you can get into some very interesting conversations with people that are very attached to their identity.
Oh, that is actually really wild. So that white origin story, it also came out around the time, was famous around the time that eugenics was a thing. And when we began to be anti-white as a Western culture, that white origin story was effectively debunked a million times over. Now, whether
the
that
one
actually happened,
out of Persia, the story out of Persia,
the whole Caucasus idea,
yeah,
space for the origin of man, and it was touted as white supremacy. And so now you don't find a lot of people in the mainstream who are going to give that thought any credit, which is, I think, the number one reason why I would give it credit. I wouldn't say that I ascribe to that idea specifically. I have a little weirder idea for it, but still, even historically, in the space of a few decades, that idea went from being prevalent to now heretical.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, this is murky water. It's very, very murky. And I think it behooves everyone to stay weak in the knees with it and malleable, because it's like a cat litter box. Everything's been covered up and then re-exhumed, and then,
oh yeah, and it's
of
still
information. I know exactly. That's what I'm saying.
No, it's the origin thing is impossible, because where do you pick your start point from? Did humans spring out of the ground 5,000 years ago or 500,000 years ago? And did each different type spring out of a different bush in a different mountainside?
And then
No,
what about the
they've
water?
been shuffled.
The aquatic ape.
Yeah, they've been shuffled for longer than we even know exists. That's what I think. And so to have an origin spot, I mean, we might as well go to Terra Infinita.
And as far as we know, it very well may be.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But see, we should be able to have this conversation, and we should be able to look at all the different piles of evidence and have these discussions without craziness. And right now you can't really talk about this in a lot of places because of the I guess the social engineering that is heavy at the moment, with division and this against that, and this evildoer against that evildoer, and this person was a slave and that one wasn't. And these kinds of I guess cycles of trauma and triumph.
Oh yeah. And Samuel Clemens, one time he put down a bottle long enough to say it's easier to fool people than to convince them they've been fooled. So the groupthink really stops a lot of these conversations before they happen.
Which was also one of the points of the CIA introducing the term conspiracy theorist in the 60s. Same kind of idea.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nish.
Well, this is where I want to get at with you, Nathan, is currently, what are you thinking? Like, with all this together, everything we've talked about with these kinds of origin stories, and where we are now in the never-ending game, in the never-ending cycle, and the way the narrative's being shaped right now, what are your thoughts on it? Because there are a lot of people saying a lot of different things, and there's a lot of people saying stuff that looks very credible. I see stuff everywhere that looks completely compelling and credible, especially the stuff that a lot of people want to trigger against and shuffle to the bottom or erase. That stuff always intrigues me the most.
I am against the finite answer completely. So if I were to answer that,
I'm not looking for an
Like,
absolute. I'm saying where you stand at this moment. We already established that you are a weak in the knees person like the rest of us. You're riding a wave.
What I'm really in love with is the idea that someone right now thinks that the things I've been saying is smart, and the next person actually knows something, actually knows occulted info, and is laughing his head off right now listening to me talk. My entire goal is to find that person, and even if I feel stupid, learn as much as I can from them. So where I think all of this is, I think that there is a set of people in everyday life who have a different history, who know a more accurate history of at least our near ancestors, at least our near ancestors. And you know what they do? They don't say a word because it's for them and their kind and their family. And I think that while we can pontificate until the end of the earth here on YouTube and online and in our forums, I think that the few people who actually know will never say. And that idea makes me so sad, and at the same time so hopeful.
I'm with you 100%, and I have almost a conviction in that, but I'm going to leave that alone. But when we look at, say, the idea of Cro-Magnon coming on the scene with Neanderthal, right? So conceptually, and of course, this is a conceptualization, but, you know, there's this, did one take over the other? Were they living together? There's all these different stories. And, you know, the stuff that Doc Ram talks about is very interesting. And now we're talking a third strand DNA, and that something like that may be going on currently. What do you think about all that? Because it ties into all these origin type threads that are plated into all this, or braided, I guess.
That I have something definite to. I don't believe in evolution. I'm a proponent of the punctuated equilibrium theory, wherein people go mostly the same until something catastrophic happens and it forces a change. Now, I think this happened physically. I think it happened psychologically. We know because of things like the KP index and solar weather that certain atmospheric effects can affect whether you're psychic or not on any given day. It's really strange. And for a government that says that they don't believe in that sort of stuff, to have something in existence like the KP index is a little weird. But I think that a lot of us did come up together and were forced to change together. Now imagine crawling out of the ashes of the upcoming reset and having to live with new, different kinds of people. And over a couple centuries, one group ends up killing the next, and that is how we end up every single time. And to say that dogs are different breeds but the same species, people are too. And I think that'll continue.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. I'm not an evolution person either. The missing link's a joke to me. And I do believe
it's all horseshit.
I know it is. Well, but they will put together a jaw of something. They'll find a jaw of something. They'll make a whole dinosaur out of a jaw. So, I mean,
yeah,
wow.
They've only found one dinosaur skeleton intact, and even that's questionable.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then, but people come up, and we have we have movies and literature and, you know, all this stuff that's being sold to us on one bone that somebody had a great imagination and constructed something from. So when we're looking at the idea of, say, Cro-Magnon coming onto the scene where Neanderthal looks more plausible to me. I don't see I think that they are separate, but this is just where I am, and I feel like there was some sort of I don't know how this happened, but there's some sort of something that brings this into play, just like kind of what seems to be going on right now. If you step out of the boundaries far enough to see that something's changing the realm, actually changing the nature of the realm, and that there seems to be a new type of being coming in. I'm talking about stepping way out, and this is deep woo, but it looks, to me, I'm seeing it. And it's not evolution.
No, I don't think it ever was. I really don't. But as for what's next, I mean, that's the exciting part, isn't it? Who wants to live forever?
Well, there's a whole bunch of people.
Connor McLeod does.
Oh, Freddie. Great song.
Did you? That reminds me. There was an episode of Rick and Morty. Of course, I'm going to relate everything Rick and Morty. There was an episode of Rick and Morty where it was season 5, episode 2, I believe, where it's a really awesome episode. I don't want to ruin it, but it starts out with the whole family getting killed. And then another copy of the family, Rick says, oh shit, someone killed the decoy family. And that just continues to happen over and over and over again throughout the episode. Anyway, at the very end, the end credit scene is, I don't want to get into the whole thing. One of the subplots of the episode is that when you make a copy of a copy, it's not as good. The whole multiplicity idea, right? So some of the decoys are wooden puppets. They're not actually like clones. And the one character, Jerry, that is a wooden puppet, finds a can of varnish, and he says, we can escape. We've got varnish. We won't get harmed by the weather. So he puts all this varnish on. And he goes outside and he gets lost, and then he gets attacked by beavers, and they add him to a dam, part of him to a dam, but he's still alive through all this. And then like years pass and he's hanging in a bar, and then years pass and there's cowboys and they burn him. And then years pass and he's part of a cross that they're nailing a guy to. He's like, you went from cowboys to Christianity? Anyway, throughout that whole like 1 minute montage, they're playing Do You Want to Live Forever?
No.
It's really funny.
That's excellent.
I'll find I know it's on YouTube. I'll find it.
I love time lapses like that, like the Futurama intro.
Yes. What a great show. It's coming back, by the way, Futurama.
Oh, I hope it comes back like King of the Hill did. Like, almost as good, at least.
Yeah, I do too, because some of the way they broke, I don't want to get into it, but the way they broke up the 12 seasons into 3 DVDs or whatever for that last season was kind of cheesy. Although the D&D one was pretty good, I thought.
I had fun with it, but I don't have time for those things anymore.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
Same. Oh, I found that video. Wooden Jerry.
Wooden Jerry.
What's that Rick and Morty thing?
So Nathan, just hearing, we've got a little bit of time left. So with all this, and I kind of introduced it earlier with this whole idea of one of the narrative coming out from rabbis is they're from outside this dimension, and the origin stories is to invade this dimension. And so that also brings in the question of there's many ways to look at that. One could go with the Aramaic stuff. There's a lot of ways, but it does bring into what's colloquially known now as aliens are those that are outside the realm, coming into the realm one way or another. What are your thoughts on those kinds of others that are technically, or I guess for a better lack of, they're technically not from here in their origin story or in theory. So we look at aliens, right? That's, I think, where the go-to is these days.
Well, Jerry says aliens are demons.
No, no. Yes, I say that, but I'm joking.
Jerry's an Ashkenazi Jew.
So, okay, here we go.
I just want to clarify. I don't believe that they're actually literal demons. I have no idea what the fuck aliens are. I do not believe they exist in the way that people think of it.
I mean, okay, let's say that...
I'm more on the interdimensional traveler side. How's that?
Okay. Oh,
that's where I am too, Jared.
I've always thought that ghosts were just a frequency thing, and people always thought a ghost is wrong. Like, are you kidding me? Somebody's just hanging out, haunting you, or are you hearing an echo? Or maybe somebody's bleeding through the veil. Like, I thought that from the time I was a child, but it depends on what theory you think. Let's say the Ashkenazi are aliens. Aliens from what? Another dimension? Or maybe from Terra Infinita. Maybe they're from the Pleiades or from Vega. It all depends on what you think. But we can count on two things. And this is the same two things that they've been saying for as long as we have called them a they. I am special and you are a slave.
Yes, this is.
So no matter what they say, that is the heart of what they're saying. I'm special and you're a slave. All of their documentation, all of their actions, all of their scriptures lead to that ultimate end.
The chosen.
I am special. And you are always a slave.
Yeah. This I've always found repugnant personally. And I don't care who thinks it. And you know, Carl Jung really addresses this and talks about this whole complex, by the way. And it became very much tied into a psychological complex that gets kind of tagged in with the whole schizophrenic idea of you are special and you are, it can get tied into savior and all this, but you're the one, or your people are the one. And this, I think, is very sketchy territory to go down psychologically.
It's hubristic.
It's absolutely hubristic. And
it is pure hubris. And I mean, I'm pretty narcissistic in my daily life, but that's because I have good eyebrows. Like, that's it. But I mean, the whole point
you do have good eyebrows.
Thank you. The whole point of me being in these fields or being in these groups and offering to help out and putting my 2 cents in is to learn as much as possible, not to make a name for myself. I almost didn't say yes to Jerry because this isn't about me. I love the idea that most Chinese kids grow up with. You're not special. You're just another person. And even to the ideas of the gurus. I watched a guru talk to Mike Tyson about how wonderful ignorance was. And to live in ignorance rather than to say, I believe. And we're not special. This idea that we have to be special. All of our stories are brand new genre of hallucination called fiction and fantasy and sci-fi, where people read in and out. People watch movies, TV shows about what? Special people. What about the normal people? Because that's what almost all of us are.
Well, and this really speaks a lot to that whole New Age thing too, where everyone was Cleopatra. Nobody was the sweeper at the local pub.
Right, right. And always someone famous in your past life, right?
How many Cleopatras have I known? Jesus.
Who was that guy?
It's
David. What's his face? Go, sorry.
It's Chunk.
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about. David Mag.
It's Chunk from the Goonies. Where he's like, Michael Jackson did not stop to use your bathroom. No, but his sister did. No, everybody
But
has recently become
beyond
obsessed with
this,
being special.
but beyond this, and beyond the whole Ashkenazi thing, the idea of interdimensional, something outside here, and I don't care what it is. And so when I think of that, I don't think of the Ashkenazi at all, and I don't think of those rabbis. Remember, I only just learned about that. And
Yeah.
but I have been definitely involved in understanding that there are other energetic forces out there that are at play, and I have experiential stuff, and I understand how fallible that can be. But in my life, there's been a lot of stuff and evidence that suggests this. And so, and I'm not suggesting this is ghostly or anything. I'm just trying to understand what other people think about these things. We can call them the Fae, we can call them the Jinn, we can call them demons, we can call them ghosts, we can call them Pleiadians. But there is this idea that there are unseen things out there that have a sentience, that have a will. And even if it's a collective will, like a hive mind will, etc., and that does play into a lot of the stories we see through fiction
Certainly.
and all that. What do you think about these ideas is what I'm asking.
And none of that means that they're not part of this realm. Just
Oh yeah,
yeah.
We
a
just
part of
don't
the
have
whole.
visibility. We just can't perceive them. That's the thing. And so perception's a big deal here, but it's still this big question of the things we can't perceive, but we may feel the effects of.
Right.
So
that actually, okay, first off, this whole idea should make you feel excited. Like, even if you can't perceive it, just the idea that it exists is such a wonderful thing, because the world
yes.
would be dead without things like that. If you tell me that there's no God, there's no creation, there's no fairy fae people, there are no feather-headed nitty-muggins, then what is this world? Me acquiring things until I die? And hopefully I don't feel it when I die because I'm afraid of pain, like we've all been trained? No, I think that what's the best way to say it? Tom Waits said it best. Everything you can think of is true. And
yes,
we actually, the more we learn, thank you, science, the more that we learn, to be true. We know that some plants are capable of visible mimicry, which means a vine can climb up the stem of a tree and make itself look like one of the limbs of that tree. Now, this could be a pheromone thing, except it isn't. The vine also does it with plastic trees. And so something is allowing this vine to perceive outside of it. Every single plant and every single bit of flora in the world gives off a microscopic EMF cry. And in the presence of some, when you walk into the woods and you get that good feeling, you're inundated with overlapping EMF fields from living things. Bioelectric signatures are actually affecting your brain.
It's a morphic field.
Yes. The morphic field even leads as far back in time under a new name, or under an old name, called telegony. The story of Rama and Ravana,
yes,
where the wife was taken, and when she was returned to Rama, they actually had to test her before they allowed her to have his child, because they didn't want the child to be the spiritual son of his adversary who took her, thanks to the morphic resonance of being around someone. So these things they're not even woo anymore.
Oh.
Well, they never really were to me, but
No.
it's
They weren't, but now it's coming back. And now we're
yes.
pretending like it wasn't that the whole time. People that get excited about things like morphic resonance or telegony, people that understand electromagnetic radiation and solar wind and muon spread, things like that, can still scoff at old stories that are making more and more sense the more we understand today.
Yes.
That is cognitive dissonance.
It's like trying to tell a mask wearer that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. This has been a really, really great conversation tonight, Nathan. I very much enjoyed all of this and the pondering and the wandering and all of it. And of course, so much of this is what's so funny about all this is how dangerous right now it is to talk about some of this stuff. It's absolutely absurd, but these are the kinds of conversations I grew up having and continue to want to have. And this is the stuff that pushes us forward collectively by just questioning and talking and listening to each other and pushing out hypotheses and, what ifs and going down little veins of curiosity.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of times people get shouted down or dismissed immediately. And how can you dismiss a person unless you've seen something they've seen? There are entire conversations you can't have with people because they haven't even been exposed to the same ideas that you have, which is...
And that's increasing, by the way.
It is increasing. And so it has to be a willful effort on all of our parts to listen and say, let's have a part 2 later, because I want to find out what you're talking about before I shout it down or call you dumb. Because I might feel dumb on the second time.
I never mind feeling dumb. I don't. And you know why? Because that's inspired me to go further. And like I said, with some of the stuff we talked about tonight, there are things I've gone my whole life I didn't even know that I've just discovered that are out there that have been absolutely not obscured, that different people are talking about. It's, again, a language barrier sometimes. And here we are trying to piece these things together. We're trying to look at the puzzle. And I think we have the ability where we are now more than ever to really scrutinize a lot of information because of some of the tools we have now.
If we can remember not to be lazy, I would agree with you.
Well,
having
laziness is being
to have
built
made
in.
us lazier. Yeah.
Wally.
Oh, yeah. No, that's it. Convenience has made soft babies of all of us.
That's the truth.
Yeah, very much so. It's sad, but
I
think it needs to get far worse before it gets better, though. Unfortunately.
Yeah, something's got to break before you can rebuild it. But Ordo ab Chao is their mantra.
Yep.
Never mind that it is actually a viable solution to a problem.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that that's been perverted, and that's the only meaning we can derive for it, because Ordo ab Chao is a sound concept.
None of their methods or beliefs are necessarily not clever. They're just inhumane in a lot of ways. Not to them, but to us, to the sheep.
Yeah, you can use a rock to build a wall or kill your brother. I mean, it all depends on the use.
Depends on the context.
Yeah.
Was he fucking your sister? Kill him. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, intent, it does break down to that. So thank you.
Yes.
Which, by the way, as a little bit of a teaser for anybody that's interested in the Obery, do you know where Canada comes from?
The name?
Lay it on us.
The country?
Canada, by way of Cana.
Yes, that is something that's in the mix. And isn't that interesting? The first blood, or the born of the first blood, and that whole thing.
Yep. My friends are all over me.
You son of a bitch. All right, cool. Well, we didn't get to talk much about actual hidden history, so we'll have to have you back to cover some of that.
Yeah, we'll go specific next time.
We'll go specific next time, like do Orphan Train, like an Orphan Train episode.
Yeah, but this was a fun meander.
That was great.
It was really, really fun.
It was awesome.
I so enjoyed this.
I think we should bring both you and Alex on, though, and you guys can tag team.
Yes, I'm a support character.
You're the straight man. All right.
See, he tells the jokes, I sing the songs, and get the girl.
Oh, okay.
There you go. Well, thank you everyone for listening. This has been wonderful. Thank you, Nathan, so much. Do you have any place anyone can find you? I know you don't really not big on social media.
I'm not, but if you want to know what I'm talking about, anytime I speak, obryproject.org. The project is spelled with a K. Stolenhistory.net. And if you have a mind for ancient holistic sciences, especially where the body is concerned, stolenmedicine.net is the new offshoot, and it's gotten a lot of traffic lately. It's worth checking out.
Cool. I will put that into the show notes right now. I'll put that in the show notes. There we go.
And yes, thank you. Gary Taters is the reason I decided to do this, because he's been bugging me about doing my own thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
Much love to Gary Taters. And everyone in chat, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We will be back after the new year with more regular shows, and many of them will just be Nish and I BSing, talking about news and stuff. So.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get all over it.
We're gonna talk about TV shows that we watched over the holidays and dig into the esoterica there, because there's a lot of
maybe some deep booty love, all of it.
Oh, don't tease.
Thank you.
I got all these chicks banging down my door this week. What is going on?
Jerry, you're hot stuff out there.
Yeah,
it's that confidence just rolling off.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
It's that Ashkenazi blood.
It is. Girls like lizards.
Jerry's representing. Anyway,
right.
Thank you everyone for coming here and playing with us, especially you, Nathan, and always you, Jerry.
Thank you, Nish. Thank you, Nathan. All right. Have a great night.